The ministry of Elisha helps us understand that God is just as big in the small events that we seem to think are almost insignificant as He is in the Mount Carmel events. You see, when we need a healing, God shows up. Elisha was given a ministry of restoration and mercy. The first of the miracles I want to talk about today is the widow's oil. One of Elisha's miracles provided for a destitute widow, ensuring that her sons wouldn't be taken into slavery. Now, this was a widow of one of the prophets. A prophet had died, left a widow and 2 sons behind, and they were destitute. They were in debt. And the creditor, or a creditor at least, came after them, threatened to take her sons and make slaves of them in order to pay the debt. She was in desperate strait, and so she sought out Elisha and told Elisha her story. And as she was telling the story, Elisha asked a key question. What do you have? Let's read about it in 2 Kings chapter 4, verses 5 through 7. So she did as she was told. Now, Elisha had told her when she said that she had a little bit of oil in a jar, he said, have your sons gather as many jars, as many containers as they can, bring them into your house, and start pouring oil. And so she did as she was told. Her sons kept bringing jars to her, and she filled one after another. Soon every container was full to the brim. Bring me another jar, she said to one of her sons. There aren't any more, he told her. And then the olive oil stopped flowing. And when she told the man of God what had happened, he said to her, now sell the olive oil and pay your debts, and you and your sons can live on what is left over. Do you notice how personal that miracle is? And how it gets right down where we live? I don't know how many of you have ever faced circumstances or situations when you weren't sure how the bills were going to get paid. Maybe you weren't sure how you were going to have the next meal. But then God showed up. Diana and I have dozens and dozens of testimonies about that kind of situation over and over and over and over. God is always there. Always, always there. The second miracle I want to share with you is, I've called it the Shunammite's son. Now, Elisha frequented the town of Shunem. It was a place of his regular visitation. I don't know whether he had a special itinerary set up and he was like a circuit rider and went from place to place, or exactly what it was, but the scripture indicates that he frequently went to Shunem. There was a wealthy lady in Shunem, and she convinced her husband, because of Elisha's frequent visits there, that they should build a prophet's chamber on the roof of their house, which they did. And so whenever Elisha came to Shunem, he had a place where he could sleep, and it was a comfortable place, and there was a lamp and a chair there, and so he was able to do his work, maybe writing or whatever the case might be. Anyway, they provided for him. And in an effort to say thank you and to express his appreciation, he made a prophecy. And the prophecy was that she would have a child. And she resisted that. She says, "Oh, no, I don't want you to give me false hope. Don't take me there. That's not where I want to go." But in due time, she had a son. And one day, the son, after he was a few years old, was in the fields working with his father, and he was taken with a very serious headache, so much so that they carried him to his mother. And we'll pick up the story in chapter 4, verses 34 through 37. Well, let me build a little bit more into the story here. The child, after being carried to his mother, literally died in her arms. So she carried him up and put him in the bed of the prophet, and then called for a donkey to go and find the prophet. And when she found him, her spirit was very troubled, and the prophet's servant Gehazi endeavored to get her to move aside, and the prophet said, "Oh, let her be, let her be. You see, something's troubling her spirit, and God has not revealed it to me. But just let her be." When Elisha finally discerned that it involved her son, he sent Gehazi with the prophet's staff, Elisha's staff, on ahead to Shunem, and then Elisha and the Shunammite followed along later. When Elisha finally got there, Gehazi had been there. He'd laid the staff on the corpse. Nothing happened when he laid the staff on the corpse, and he was on his way back. And they met Elisha and the Shunammite as they were approaching the town of Shunem. When the prophet got there, we'll pick this up in verse 34 of chapter 4. Then he lay down on the child's body. This is the prophet, placing his mouth on the child's mouth, his eyes on the child's eyes, and his hands on the child's hands. And as he stretched out on him, the child's body began to grow warm. Elisha got up, walked back and forth across the room once, and then stretched himself out again on the child. This time, the boy sneezed 7 times and opened his eyes. Then Elisha summoned Gehazi, called the child's mother. He said, and when she came in, Elisha said, "Here, take your son." She fell at his feet and bowed before him, overwhelmed with gratitude. Then she took her son in her arms and carried him downstairs. So this miracle shows that God controls nature. He is able to intervene even in something as permanent as at least as we think of it, as death. And then the third miracle. And please understand, these are not all the miracles. There are, when I was preparing this message, I discovered that there's a lot of material about Elisha. There are 4 chapters of material about Elisha in 1 Kings, and then there are 9 chapters about him in 2 Kings. So you have a total of 13 chapters of material about this guy, named Elisha. We could be here for a week and a half if we covered it all. So I had to pick and choose. So Naaman's healing. The third and last of Elisha's miracles that we're going to consider today involved the healing of a Syrian commander. He was healed of leprosy, showing that God's grace extends beyond the borders of Israel. In 2 Kings chapter 5, we have the story of Naaman. He has a servant, or his wife has a servant girl, and she is one of the captives from Israel. And the servant girl says to her mistress, Naaman's wife, have your husband go to the prophet in Israel, and the prophet in Israel will heal him. So Naaman speaks to his boss, the king, and the king sends a letter to the king of Israel and says, I'm sending you this commander of mine. He has leprosy, and I want you to heal him. And the king of Israel says, say what? That's outside of my realm. That's above my pay grade. I can't do that. And he takes offense. But as soon as Elisha hears that Naaman is there in Israel and has this letter, Elisha says, send him to me. So Naaman gladly goes to Elisha's house and expecting that the prophet's going to come out and maybe wave his hand over him and say something really profound, and he's going to suddenly be well. The prophet doesn't come out. He sends Gehazi. He tells Gehazi, his servant, go out and tell Naaman to go dip 7 times in the Jordan River and he'll be well. Naaman responded to that just about like some of you respond when somebody cuts you off on the 60. He was not a happy camper. But Naaman had some junior officers that had a little more wisdom than he did. When they calmed him down, got him settled a little bit, convinced him that he should just go do this thing, dip 7 times in the Jordan River and see what happens, he did. And we pick it up in verse 14 of chapter 5. So Naaman went down to the Jordan River and dipped himself 7 times as the man of God had instructed him, and his skin became as healthy as the skin of a young child, and he was healed. So the ministry of Elisha helps us understand that God is just as big in the small events that we seem to think are almost insignificant as He is in the Mount Carmel events. You see, when we need a healing, God shows up.